Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Riding solo for the moment, although we have a special guest coming up in just a little bit, but a lot to get to on today's show. Thank you for being here. And as always, this is your place for Penn State football talk. So if you've got friends, you've got people that are checking out on football, I know it's February, but my goodness, there's a lot of things to talk about today. Trace McSorley is a Nittany Lion again. Smith Vilbert in the transfer portal strikes again. The NFL Combine coming up. And of course, a couple other news and notes. There's something I've been following along. We may talk about it tomorrow on the recruiting show. We may not. But I've got some things I want to discuss when it comes to the 2026 class. So all that coming up on today's show. And I'm remembering this off the bat because I always forget to do this early in the show. Subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's just $1 to try us out for the first week. And then if you want to join us for a full year, you can decide after that. A lot of the information we've discussed on the message board already. And we're going to get to some of that here today and some of the plans and things that we have going on behind the scenes at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We want you to be a part of it. So join us there for just $1 for the first week to try it out. If you like it, great. You can join us for a full year after that. If you missed the $1 a week for a year deal, I'm sorry. Like these things, they don't last forever. So, we'll have other deals in the future, but the best thing you can do is just join us right now and get in on the conversation. Okay. This happened last night. We're going to address this first. Penn State loses Smith Vilbert to the transfer portal. The veteran 6th year, I think it is, defensive end, 6, 7, I don't know. COVID makes everything crazy. He is entering the transfer portal as a grad transfer. Just an interesting timing of that. We discussed him on the show yesterday and some of the plans for what he was going to be for the Penn State defensive line, which lost a lot of depth this past offseason, retaining those defensive ends. But some of the things we had been able to learn was the initial plan, at the very least, was that Vilbert was going to play defensive tackle for Penn State. So that plus the decision to transfer, I find the staging of these things interesting, and we'll get to Pat Kraft here in a second. But if you're going to be playing defensive tackle and also playing defensive end, probably not penciled in as a starter. I think that's a fair way to put that. If you're going to be moonlighting between two positions, doesn't mean you're not going to play a whole lot, but in terms of, was he going to be a starting defensive end? At least from my read of Jim Knowles' defense and the way he's operated at every stop that we've identified and observed, he's played pretty stringent positional definitions between defensive ends and defensive tackles. So if he's moonlighting between two positions on one side, probably was going to be the backup behind Denai Dennis Sutton, and then probably a guy that plays at that defensive tackle position more regularly. So if he wants to go somewhere and start his final season, then I think that makes sense. If he's waiting to see what the plan was, they come to him with a plan, and then he doesn't like said plan and hence the portal and has opportunities and monetary opportunities elsewhere. I think that makes sense for a guy who's got one more shot to make it to the NFL and make an impression. And this is somebody, by the way, who James Franklin called like an NFL prospect. He was very high on Smith Vilbert in terms of the talent that he has and what he's able to do by putting on all that weight and the body type and the position flexibility he has. Very valuable in the NFL. Now, I don't know if he's going to make it to the NFL. I don't know where he's going to land. But those are some things that I think are going into this conversation in this process for Smith Vilbert. So off the top, Penn State losing Smith Vilbert to the transfer portal. The impact at Penn State, the defensive end room, it's all TBD right now. That's the problem, is there's a lot of decisions that have to happen. There's a lot of things that have to play out for Penn State in terms of what are they going to incorporate from Jim Knowles' defense? How are they going to assess all of these things and then put them into order from positions and then play style? Because if you have just defensive ends, it's a very different conversation than if you have a field boundary designation and where those players are going to play. So, I think Penn State has enough players that they can fill out those roles, but it's going to lean then on a lot of redshirt freshmen. Max Granville and Jalen Harvey, step on up. Like, this is going to be a part of the conversation now, is it's going to be a youth movement at defensive end. Now, Here's what Pat Kraft had to say earlier this week. And I thought it was interesting how he mentioned Abdul Carter before getting into other things when it came to the training.
And yes, I think you got to be in the world that when you lose someone to the NFL, you lose someone as dynamic as Abdul Carter. That is really hard to replace. You got to go backfill. You got to create depth. You lose, you got injuries, you have different things. So that's where the portal, I think, comes into play. But you really got to evaluate that. We all know we need wide receiver help. So we got to go find one. I think we have some really good ones in the building, but everyone knows, like, it's not a secret. So you go find
that. To the point I'm trying to make here, the conversation ended it with wide receiver with a very pregnant pause there. We need to go find one. But he also mentioned defensive end. I can't imagine that Penn State was blindsided by this decision yesterday, a day after Pat Kraft makes those comments. So obviously there's a little bit of foreshadowing from Pat Kraft there, but Penn State likely to be active in the spring portal based on these conversations and the tone set of we want to go win a national championship. So if by all powers that they have, they're going to fill holes on their roster. It does not mean that there's going to be players available that are going to be better. It doesn't mean that they're going to go out and they're going to spend like crazy and find all of the best players to come in and replace Abdul Carter or any of those things. But they're going to make the effort in a real way this year to fill some of those roles and some of those needs. So your favorite position, I think, is on the table for the depth chart. If you're concerned about linebacker, I don't know if Penn State feels the same way specifically, but I think it's on the table. We got people in the chat here. Eggman says, is T. Frank lip sync off? Is this AI T. Frank? No, this is me live. Is everything okay? Blink twice if we're still live and you can still see my face. I love being live here on a high wire with nobody else to read the chat. This is super fun. I want to see what you guys have to say here in the chat. But for the most part, when it comes to this defensive end position, I think there's some interesting potential here from Anai White. Total wild card in this situation. They've got to get something out of some of these transfers, but really it is a young room. When you look around, denied Dennis Sutton, I think that's the part that is the most concerning for Penn State. Is it is just a youth movement. Guys like Mason Robinson, redshirt sophomore, we haven't seen him at this point in his career. We haven't really seen anything from him. Been unavailable, been in the training room a whole lot. So some of these other guys that are a little bit older are run-on candidates. Bobby Mears, Jordan Mayer. There's not a whole lot of veteran players now at that defensive end position. You were expecting and leaning on Zariah Fisher, Dennis Sutton, and Smith Vilbert. Now, what do you do at defensive end? I think becomes really interesting. And then, of course, that speaks to the defensive tackle situation. If Penn State was planning on moonlighting Smith Vilbert at defensive tackle, one of two things can be true. They expected him, that's his best position, putting him in position for the next level, or they don't feel good about that depth either. And again, young players at that defensive tackle position is kind of a little bit of a concern for sure for Penn State fans. I think it's legitimately a really good reason for you to think that there's work still to be done on that part of the roster. Now, there's more depth at defensive tackle, believe it or not, that could contribute this upcoming season, just because the number of available players that are still on the roster. Ty Blanding and Alonzo Ford will be back at some point. And of course, Xavier Gilliam. All of those players have some experience, at least, and you've seen a little bit more of what they can do. So that's the situation right now with the transfer portal. I'm curious to see what else happens as we go through spring football. This won't be the last. We're not expecting a mass exodus, but I don't believe this will be the last player that leaves Penn State via the transfer portal this spring. Just don't know exactly how all of that is going to work out and when. But the timing of this, I think, is interesting in terms of winter workouts just started. I'm assuming the plan came together, and then Smith Vilbert making his decision now. Okay, of course, the thing that everybody wants to know this week, today, and this one, again, I feel like Pat Kraft has been breaking news over the last couple of weeks, or at least the last 4 days or so, when it comes to letting the cat out of the bag early. Part of the THON conversation, Trace McSorley, I think, came out during THON, and Pat Kraft introduced him and previewed that he had a job with the Nittany Lions. Trace McSorley joining the program as an assistant quarterback coach. It's an interesting conversation about the expanding roster of players that you can, former players, assistants, things that you can add to the program. There is no limit on the number of coaches you can have. The limit is compensation and the pot of money there is to spend. So what value does Trace McSorley bring to the program? And I'm not saying this in a flippant way. In the chat, I want to know what you think. What is the value that Trace McSorley brings to Drew Allar? To specifically this year, bringing him in for Drew Allar. I would say at this point, the first thing I think is this is more for Trace than it is for Penn State. As far as I know, Trace doesn't have any coaching experience. Like, he's coming from the NFL and kind of a year in between. I don't know if he was coaching in the intermediary, but not to the level of other guys that have had to earn it before joining Penn State. You know, Deion Barnes joins as grad assistant when that was still a grad assistant thing. And now that the analyst positions are open to coaching, it's a little bit different. But to me, this is more of, I want to be respectful here, because I think that he'll be a good coach. I have no question that he will provide value and he will earn his time at Penn State. No, there are few people as responsible for Penn State being ahead of the curve when it comes to rebounding from the sanctions and being in the Big Ten championship game in 2016 than Trace McSorley. You know, like, on the list of people who made that happen and put Penn State where they are right now and had built that winning culture early on under James Franklin, Trace McSorley is right near the top of the list. So it's one of those situations where a guy who is always going to have a job from James Franklin. But I don't want it to be like a pseudo nepotism or a loyalty thing. I think he does bring value, and he will bring value. And that's where I'm wondering, of course, this is what everyone's going to say, moxie. But my question is, can you actually give somebody else your moxie? Like, can you give somebody else mojo? If you're great at dating, can you you can teach somebody what you do, like the steps to a dance, but you can't make them a dancer, can you? Because that's the thing that I think everyone's going to point to. I think there's all right, here's what we're going to do. This is going to be super awful. Might want to refresh the streaming software. Audio and video aren't synced. Yeah, that's easier to do when there's 3 people live. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a brief interlude. Let's see if I can pull this off and refresh said software. So we'll be back in just 1 second. Okay, let me know if that worked. Oh, this is what happens when Greg goes on vacation. There are only a handful of people that I feel like I can say easily that work harder than me. And I'm not trying to say that as like a bragging thing. It's more of like, Greg's a machine, and I refused to let him work today. He's on vacation. So we're going to have hopefully a special guest here coming up in just a little bit. But let me know if everything is actually working for the first time in 15 minutes live on the show. Appreciate you guys helping me out in the chat. We got our regulars here. Christian, Appreciate you there. Steven says, and we're getting back to our conversation, Trace McSorley joining the Nittany Lions as an assistant QB coach. He says, no Trace equals no Penn State top 10 finish for a decade. So Rob says, James Franklin doesn't hire people for no reason. He'll have a role. Rob, the literal of the comment and conversation is sure. That's not what I was trying to say. I appreciate you clarifying that. He absolutely will be earning his role at Penn State. I'm just curious as to how he imparts that player level wisdom to Drew Allar. Some of the things that I think tangibly he can do include his ability to play in Andy Kotelnicki's offense specifically. Now, at this point, Allar probably has a better handle on the offense's nuts and bolts than McSorley does. But I'm curious as to, from that option game perspective, does McSorley, who is really good at generating big plays out of the option game, does he have an ability to impart specific things that aren't moxie to the conversation that can allow Allar to unlock some of those things in his game? And I'm not talking about just in the read option game. I'm talking about the RPO game, throwing the ball, and of course in that read option, because Andy Kotelnicki's offense is more of a return to what Joe Moorhead did at Penn State. So schematically, I think this is the area where Trace McSorley lives. And it isn't just about Drew Allar. You know, guys like Ethan Grunkmeyer and Jackson Smolik, future recruits, Beckham Kritza, all these guys can learn from Trace McSorley and can absorb that information and can absorb some of those things to help the quarterback room overall. There was somebody else who said about something else here in the chat. Basically, it was about playing with an edge. And we'll go with Eggman. Basically the same conversation. Best thing in the world for Allar psychologically. McSorley was a fearless gunslinger. Allar has been rendered tentative by receivers who can't get separation. I think it's a little more complicated than that in terms of it's just the receiver's fault or it's just Mike Yursic's fault. Or I think personality does play a big part of this. And I think you guys are right, by the way, when it comes to the ability to play with an edge. I think we saw our guy Drew play with more of an edge last year. It's not just about the edge, it's about control. And I've been doing some studying on sports psychology this offseason. And one of the things that is a principle here is it's not just about having the it factor. It's not just about playing with poise. It's about the level and the newness of the thing you're doing affecting your mental state. Certain players, the stakes don't matter to them. They don't notice them. McSorley is one of those players. Other times you watch players evolve and they're somebody who gets better in big moments over time, because the farther you go and do a new thing, like play in the college football playoff, play in January, play in the Orange Bowl, all these are new environmental factors. And if you're somebody who is affected by those things, you need to do them a couple times in order to get a grasp of them. And some people, that assimilation in is just much easier. So I'm curious as to, I'm not expecting him to be a sports psychologist. He's not here to be Drew Allar's therapist. But are there things he can impart that can be a part of that conversation and be a part of him growing and developing as a quarterback? Because I think the maturity is, a thing that's going to get better over time anyway. He's a senior. And this is what happens when you play from the very first snap of your freshman season all the way here to your senior season. We get to see all the warts. We get to see all the growth. We get to see all the good and the bad. And it's not like it used to be, where a guy waits 2-3 years and then suddenly is the starter later on in his career. Steven says, also Trace can help with some technical aspects, and he played in the NFL. I don't think there's any Trace transfusion possible. That's what everybody wants. They just want to take that, whatever it is, put it into Drew Allar and make the transformer version of the Penn State quarterback. Like that game you play when you like take the best 5 qualities from 5 different quarterbacks and make a super quarterback. That's what everybody wants in this particular situation. What's the realistic ability here? I've got somebody who might have a better answer than me, And that is a good friend of the show, former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall joining us. Landon, welcome. Appreciate you coming in and hanging out with me today while I'm up here on a high wire with the technical stuff that isn't working, and also no Greg. So appreciate you joining the show and bailing me out today.
No, yeah, appreciate it. I was sorry, guys. I was supposed to be on a little bit earlier. Got to the studio, and I had a rough morning, too. Realized my computer's dead, and there was no charger. I left it at home, and then I get back, and then someone's in my parking spot, so I had to park, like, really far away and walk. So it's been a little bit of a doozy, but I'm glad we get to talk a little bit about some Penn State football.
Yeah, so I've been discussing the Trace McSorley conversation of joining the program. There's two different conversations here. What does he do for Drew Allar in 2025 to help Penn State win a national championship? What does he bring as a quarterback coach? Somebody who doesn't have extensive coaching experience, but also has all the things that make Trace McSorley who he is. What do you make of the hire? Just first off, what do you think of this particular hire?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, I got to spend the whole Saturday night with Trace. Actually, we emceed the pep rally at THON, so it was cool. So I got to talk to him a lot about kind of everything going on, and obviously he's really excited about it. And I think anytime we're getting a lot of Letterman back, and Letterman that have also won here, which I think is important for guys to be able to kind of talk to them and even just like ask them stories, like what was it like, et cetera. And I think that can help. I definitely do think, and I kind of heard you talking about it, there is a little bit of this mindset that like Trace McSorley, that like just fearless, lay it all on the table. They think that's just going to like transfer into Drew automatically out of nowhere just because Trace is on staff.
Right.
I mean, I think that's an unrealistic expectation, I would say. I did make the tweet that not many people know what it's like to be quarterback one at Penn State. So when Drew Allar is up at night and, instead of, can text Danny O'Brien and Danny can try to relate but doesn't really know, well, Trace McSorley is just, what, I guess, two quarterbacks removed? Only two quarterbacks removed, right? Pretty much as far as
one.
Oh, I guess one. I guess that would be one. Just Sean Clifford.
Because Sean Clifford was here for 15 years. Yeah.
So, I think it's pretty neat. Like I said, not many people know what Drew goes through every single day. So Trace can kind of relate to that. But from a standpoint of actual, coaching ability, like you said, this is his first gig. I will say this, that I think Trace is going to be a great coach just from how he is, but not automatically just because someone was good. It doesn't necessarily just make them a good coach. And there's a lot of different qualities that kind of go into that. I think the biggest thing is, are you a teacher? Can you understand, can you get the other person to actually understand what you are trying to convey? Because that's honestly why a lot of times some of the best players ever are actually bad coaches, because they were so gifted.
Just do it like I did.
Just do it. Just do this.
Like, it's so easy to do this one thing. And like, no, it's not. Only you can do that.
Exactly. So not at all saying that is the case at Trace, but sometimes that can be the case with really, really good players that then turn coach. But I mean, look, I'm excited. Like I said, I think, getting him on staff is really cool for the fans. I think, it probably, not to burst anybody's bubble, me and T. Frank are probably the people that like do that the most, but it probably means a little less than what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
I will say, just to keep expectations real. But like I said, I think nonetheless, to have that guy with Drew to be able to go out and throw, like I'm sure Trace, at the end of the day, I was thinking about this while I was riding home last night. I'm just saying, Trace didn't announce his retirement. I'm just saying, like, from a standpoint of like, I'm just saying, maybe he just continues to throw with Drew, and then that can get no, I mean, really, like, I was like, what if, like, out of nowhere, like, after the season, he's just like, or like mid-season, he just gets a call from like a team, and it's like, yo, are you ready to go? And it's like, yeah, I've been throwing. And then Trace goes, I'm not saying
throwing,
that at all.
I've been lifting, I have free nutrition here at the program. Like, that's a brilliant hack, by the way, and getting paid to do it.
Exactly.
That's a great point.
Yeah, but no, I think that is really, because like I said, I thought about that. I was like, that's nothing that I've talked to him about. I'm not saying like he hasn't said anything about that, but I just thought it was interesting that he didn't actually retire. So that kind of tells me he's keeping it alive. But like I said, I think that having that, I'm sure he's going to want to throw. And he's actually done that before. Trace was throwing in the indoor with Grunkmeyer, Drew Allar, and Brad Mendler, their quarterback trainer. There were some videos of them doing that in Haluba Hall, where I think we saw Ethan Grunkmeyer just absolute zip on it. So excited to see more from him. But But yeah, I think that could definitely be beneficial to kind of that dynamic of having someone, not only a coach, but someone that is literally going to be in there throwing with you, and you kind of just a little bit more of that player mindset, because he's obviously just a year removed from playing NFL ball.
James Franklin talked about Stan Drayton, and generally talking about we don't have time to wait to develop a coach when it comes to the running back position. The assistant quarterback position, a little bit different, especially when you got Andy Kotelnicki, you got Danny O'Brien, who is, well received in that role as the quarterback coach. And now you have a guy who can come in and give you kind of some of that. And there is a developmental area for this to work where it doesn't have to be, he's unlocking the fullness of this particular roster of quarterbacks right away, but it is something that develops over time. And, like if you slide into all those things, when it comes to Trace getting something out of the situation, I love that. I just love that you thought of that. That's exactly the sort of out of the box, third eye open sort of conversation I love to have.
No, I appreciate it. No, I was driving home and I'm like, yo, what if he gets a call? Like, I just thought about that because I was like, oh, Trace didn't, like, I saw like Penn State made the post. Well, actually, Pat Kraft, we were at the pep rally for THON, and Pat Kraft, we introduced Pat Kraft, and he walks out and he's like, I'm just going to say it. He's like, he's on staff. But it was like hard to hear. And I think some people were like, oh, is like Pat Kraft joking? And like, obviously you didn't want to like take that and report on it as like gospel, right? Because then if you're like, it's not a real thing, that would have been bad for some people. But we were kind of laughing. I turned to Trace and I'm like, did you already announce it? He was like, no, but I guess he is.
That's what I said before you were on the show. Pat Kraft has been just like undercutting breaking news for the past 4 or 5 days with this. And yesterday, kind of hinting that the Penn State was going to need some defensive ends in the transfer portal. And then lo and behold, Smith Vilbert, he's gone to the portal as of last night. So he has been on one recently where like I feel like he's one of those guys where he gets done talking and he's like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Oh, well, I don't mind. Whatever.
I like it. I think it definitely makes him a lot more like human. I think a lot of times we think of like, whenever it's like an AD, it's like they're up here. And I think he does a really good job because of that. It's like, oh, he's just like a normal guy, just like you and me. And that's kind of the vibe that you get. And I like it. It's very transparent. It is. And I think I really enjoyed listening to his press conference. A lot of times I'll just kind of like skim through the other press conferences, see if there's anything. I go to Blue White Illustrated. I see the little tickers and I appreciate you guys doing that. It makes my life a lot easier. I remember once I was looking through the tickers and one of them was like Landon Tengwall. And I was like, oh crap. I'm like, what?
That makes you like your heart stop. Like, oh no, what did I do?
Oh no. Yeah, definitely not good. No. But that's I think it's really cool, kind of like I said, how transparent he is and open. And I think it's beneficial to everybody, and the fans really like it. And obviously Penn State, as we've seen, I'm sure you guys have had talks about it, but Penn State is all in. I mean, it really feels that way. And I think Pat Kraft is a big reason why.
And it's part of the conversation when it comes to these moves that Penn State is not going to leave any. I hate using cliches. No stone unturned, Landon. They're going to go over to the Beaver Stadium and they're going to remove the concrete and find anything they can in the rubble to find the winning advantage. But anyway, I want to talk about here in the second half of the show a couple of things. And the first is the NFL Combine, which is going to on-field drills, I think, start tomorrow. And we're going through the interview process right now. So let's talk about the NFL Draft. Not quite as fun when Abdul Carter and KJ Winston aren't participating in the combine.
Did you make that?
Yes, I did.
Did you make that edit, T. Frank? I got to give you a quick round of applause. Sorry, I can appreciate that because I've had bad editing and that was really, really good. So, okay, continue.
It came out this week, not a surprise. Abdul Carter playing through a shoulder injury in the playoff, not participating in the combine. KJ Winston during the playoff, Adam Schefter tweeted via an agent, most likely, that he was going to be cleared March 1st for activities, on-field activities, putting his timeline for the pro day, not for the NFL combine, which leaves Tyler Warren, Jaylen Reed, and Kobe King. 3 players at the NFL Combine. Penn State doesn't always blow up the Combine, but when they do, they blow up the Combine. And the reason the intro was that way is because you're not getting that this year. This feels like one of the least anticipated combines from Penn State for people who observe. No combine is anticipated for some people. But how are you viewing all of this stuff? Because I know you've been doing draft work on these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think first off with Abdul, I think everybody wanted to see like what his 40 was, and I think we may see that at Pro Day. Who knows? But I was excited to kind of just see his raw athleticism on tape, and when you see those cut ups from combine, and it just would put together like Abdul's 5.10.5 next, and then his 40, and then his broad jump, and just kind of see it all in one video. I was looking forward to that, but at the same time, I think as many people said, and his agent, the team saw everything they needed to see. The fact that dude played with one arm in the semifinal game,
dominated,
and it should have had 2 sacks. He had one taken away from a Zane Durant hands to the face, but I mean, I don't think we need to see anything else. Obviously, with KJ, actually saw someone tweeting about that today, how someone's going to get a steal with KJ Winston. I think we know that. I'm sure he's going to. Yeah, it's like, please, my Steelers, come on. Like, I want to tell everybody he's so good. Just, I promise you, take a chance on him. But I don't think KJ was necessarily someone that would have knocked. I mean, he wouldn't have had insane numbers, but definitely would have had good numbers. I mean, he was always pretty fast. One of the guys normally in the front of the pack whenever we were doing any type of running or anything like that. But I think the person that could propel themselves is Tyler Warren. And it's funny to say, because he is a lock to go in the first round. Yeah. But I think if we see a sub, I don't know what I want to say, probably a sub 4.7, if he's in the 4, like he could
4.65 would be the number. I think is a really good number.
That I think if he has something that comes away that people would label as an impressive combine, and I think he will have it. I mean, I remember we would do the testing twice a year, and we were always kind of together. I mean, he has a really good broad jump, really good vertical. I think he needs to be around, like, I think 4 tight ends last year jumped 36, I think it was, on the vertical, 36 or 37. So if he can be right around there on the vertical and then run that, like you said, about 4.65, I think he could easily sneak his way close to like top 10-ish, because that's, everybody wants to have that tight end now. Like, everybody wants to have that versatile guy. And you turn on the tape, T. Frank, and you can also check this out. I'm dropping a Tyler Warren film breakdown Friday morning before the combine. The tight ends and I want to say DBs, I think, are on Friday. But I'm dropping tape, and the first thing I put in his tape was his blocking, because I think that's what separates him the most from everybody else. So I'm really excited to see kind of what he can showcase there. And then Jalen Reed is someone that he consistently, Jay Reed, I love him. He'd be fine if I shared this. Consistently like sends me DMs of other things, of other people, and he's like, look at this, they're doubting me. He's like, I love it. And I'm just laughing. I'm like, Jay Reed, because we're good friends, obviously we came in the same class, and I'm like, dude, you got it, just go do your thing. And I think that's another guy.
He has the most to gain, I would imagine, in terms of testing, because I think everyone, when you watch the film, you go, this guy can play football. He's really good around the line of scrimmage. Blitzing was, I would say, like Tig Brown and he are in kind of a different category from a secondary player ability to blitz. But then the question becomes, like, 40 time, what are the situations you can put him in the NFL where he'll be able to hold up? And that does have to do with change of direction, pure speed, things like that. Do you agree, or do you think Warren or Kobe King has more to gain in that sense?
Oh, I would say, I mean, Kobe's up there, because Kobe's 40 is going to mean so much, because I think that's a huge question with the fact of, his coverage skills obviously took a hit. I remember sitting there, I think you probably did the same, when we saw Notre Dame's running back, Aeneas Williams, get motioned to the top of the screen and Kobe followed him. I'm screaming, and my girlfriend's like, the play hasn't started yet. And I'm like, no, double move and right down the sideline against Notre Dame. So Kobe King could be up there. I would probably give the nod to him, because it's like, if Kobe has a bad 40, like, he could go a lot lower in the draft. But if he runs, I don't even know what a good 40. I'm trying to think for like a middle linebacker. But if he does whatever they classify as good enough, I think you can look and say, okay, we can work with this guy. He is an elite run stuffer, we can figure out kind of, on passing downs, maybe he's not on the field as much. But I think a bad or a good 40 time could swing Kobe King really far one way or the other.
We got this in the chat. This is from Chris the Ripper. 22. He says, Tyler Warren not doing drills at the combine. Just a quick Twitter search because we're here live. Jordan Schultz reporting that Tyler Warren not working out the NFL combine, just doing interviews. And I think this, Landon, kind of speaks to some of the conversation we're having about Tyler, which is his draft stock is pretty high. Why do anything that could jeopardize it? Why potentially run a bad 40 or do a 3-cone drill that doesn't show great change of direction skill when I know there is some questions about that? You watch the film and Tyler Warren, you mentioned his vertical leap, contested catch, no questions about those areas. But when you talk about vertical separation, straight line speed, ability to generate space on his own, those were questions. And I don't think that it's anything that should prevent him from being a guy that is, because he can go down the field and contested catch, jump over a guy and get a ball. He's a red zone target, the run blocking. The composite of what Tyler Warren is a first-round draft pick at his position. It's just don't give anybody any doubt, I would imagine, in terms of not wanting to work out at the combine. Because I know he's been training. It's not like he hasn't been training for the combine this offseason.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like I said, I think a good 40 could have propelled him a little bit, but as you said, the risk reward, that's kind of what you are weighing there. And clearly his agent and him decided, okay, it's really not worth it. I don't think, unless you were to somehow run like a sub 4.6, then it would be like, oh my God, we have to get him in the top 10. But outside of that, are you really doing anything? If you go out there and run a 4.72, that doesn't really do anything. You're risking injury. Maybe you pull a hammy, something like that, and then you can't do any of the drills anyways. I think it makes more and more sense not to. I feel like we're seeing more and more opt-outs than we ever have before. Honestly, it's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, but if you can make money, then you run the 40. I remember Devin Bush running the 40 and running a 4.5, and then shutting it down because that made him sorry. I know.
As a Steelers fan, yes, he made a lot. He was even good his rookie year, and then it just some of the worst linebacking play I've seen in a long time after that.
To your point about Kobe King, this is the part where I think, I always had a hard time during the Tyler Elsdon Kobe King battles and everyone wanting Kobe King to start immediately and everyone saying Tyler Elsdon is so slow. They are closer athletically, from a pure speed perspective that I think a lot of fans want to accept. And that's, again, Kobe has a lot of other things going for him. Length, size, I would say fluidity. Speed is not just a linear thing. It's in football, you have to run in every direction, 4 separate directions. And so those are all qualities that I think Kobe can do those things. The 10-yard split, I think, is the most interesting thing because if he's going to be a box thumper and he's going to be a guy that is, coming downhill and attacking the run, that first 10 yards is more important than the full 40. Do you think he can put up a number there that is, maybe he doesn't get into the 4.5s, which I would highly doubt, but like, does he run something that's, a one, I want to say like a 1.6 is a good 10-yard split. You think that there's something he can do there?
Yeah, I definitely think there is the possibility. I just looked it up. So the average 40-yard dash for linebackers at the NFL Combine is 4.71 seconds right now.
Are we considering edge rushers? Because I hate that. The NFL still does outside linebacker as a linebacker, and that's dumb.
Yes, I believe they are also including them. That's kind of what it seems here. Yeah. So, over here it says outside linebacker 4.6 is the average. So I think this might be. I think this is all linebackers. I'm not exactly sure, but it sounds like if he can be in that realm, as long as we don't see like a 4.8, like that would start to be like, ooh, oh no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be very important for him. I think, like I said, could really swing him one way or the other. But as you said, I think a lot of people don't realize how important and how much emphasis is put on that 10-yard split, especially for, like you said, a box linebacker, an offensive lineman. Like, there are certain things as a GM that I'm really looking at that 10-yard split for specific positions. And that, like you said, if Kobe it's what he's going to play, is going to be a thumper in the box, Well, that's what I wanted to see. Can he move quickly? I think his 5'10" will be really big. How, that change of direction, that's pretty much the number one thing. We know Kobe King is a fantastic block shedder. We're seeing videos of him throwing offensive linemen out of the club. Well, now, are you able to change direction when I'm trying to think who's a really good running back? There's a lot of them in the league. So when one of those really, really fast guys changes direction and hopefully is not, jumping over top of you or anything like that. That was a rough one for Kobe. I asked him about that. He was like, man, he said, I went to make the tackle. He just wasn't there anymore. We're talking obviously about when was that was Love, Jeremiah Love, right? Jumped over top.
Yeah.
Rough one there.
So now we're down to just Jalen Reed and Kobe King working out this week.
Wow. Remember we had like Troy, we were getting love out of Troy Apke and all that type of stuff, and now we're down to 2.
Which I was surprised. Let's talk about combine snubs. I was a little surprised that Jalen Kimber didn't get an invite, because he's a guy that I think could have had that kind of moment where he's a really good athlete. He's a really good man cover corner prospect. But I also understand in a year that's pretty loaded on the defensive side of the ball, if you're saying we're going to bring in 10, 12 corners and he's the 13th one, I'm not surprised maybe he didn't make the list of players. But at the same time, it felt like that was a snub of guys that would have done well and tested well at the combine. Is there anybody else that you think should have gone to the combine that didn't get the invite? Because that's the other part of the story, that later at the pro day, they're going to have a very big day.
Yeah, I do think, and it doesn't, I don't think he would have done that well because he's not a tester, but I honestly, Sal Wormley, I thought could have had a chance to maybe find his way there, especially he had a really good East-West Shrine game. I actually got to talk to Tyler Warren's agent about that, and he was telling me that he had was looked upon, like he had a really great game, and there was thoughts that he might have possibly found his way there. But no, I think, outside of that, some people were like, hey, maybe Devon Lee's, that type of thing. But I didn't see anybody that got snubbed that would have really, outside of Jalen Kimber, like you said, that really would have shook the place up and been like, oh, he did something to significantly increase his draft stock. I don't think anybody missed out on that opportunity because, you might be sad you didn't go if, like I said, if you're a Sal Wormley, but at the same time, you weren't really going to do anything there that was going to necessarily propel you because all, I think our freak athlete mainly was Abdul Carter, and he does not need to do this clearly.
Even if he was healthy, he didn't really need to. He might have run a 40, and then that would have been it. And that's all he really needed to do. Just for fun, by the way, just to do it. So I always alienate our listeners by talking about the Bills. Landon's a Steelers fan. But based on the demographic data that we get here from YouTube, most of our fans are Eagles fans. Most of the people that watch the show, they're from the eastern side of the state. Sorry, Landon. Which, again, you're from Maryland, which that never makes any sense to me. It doesn't. It never makes any sense to me whatsoever. But if you want more Eagles content, draft conversation, I got a chance to meet Jeff Mosher from Inside the Birds recently. Great guy. And there's a lot of crossover between what we do and what they do in terms of giving you intelligent football conversation that goes inside the details, inside the process, and makes you a smarter football fan. So if you're an Eagles fan, you haven't checked it out, Inside the Birds, you should definitely check them out. Because we're going to be doing a little more, I think, collaboration here over the next couple of weeks. And at the very least, like, I'm a fan of what they do over there. So I was like to give people shout outs like Landon and his podcast while we're giving everyone their shout outs. Landon, here on the show, tell everybody about your show.
Yes. Yeah. You can check me out at Landon Tengwall on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your stuff. We got a lot of cool content coming. It's a lot right now in the off season. It is a lot of stuff with the players, coaches, former players, Letterman, all that type of stuff. So having a good time. Yeah, you can check it out at Landon Tengwall. And doing a weekly podcast too. Kind of a variety of things, updating you guys on NIL and all that good stuff. T-Frank, I did whenever you're talking about the Eagles, we're talking about Abdul Carter. I said this to a couple of friends. Have you ever seen someone just pronounce their love for their NFL team when they are about to get drafted, like Abdul Carter, holding the trophy? He's in like Bora Bora, and he's like, here, I'm watching the Eagles game here in Bora Bora. Like, let's go. And like, I get it. He grew up, but he's obviously from Philly, so I understand. But like, I have never seen someone be that outward with their affiliation of their NFL team as they are about to get drafted.
I think the important thing here is he also got to go to the game and be there. Like, yes, the situation was such that, yeah, might as well, if you're going to get a once in a lifetime chance to be with your childhood team as they win the Super Bowl. Why the hell not? You're not going to get another chance. It's not like once you get drafted to the Titans or whomever, you can be like, you know what? We're eliminated from the playoffs, but I'm going to go to the Super Bowl parade as Tennessee Titans defensive end Abdul Carter, like that. So might as well. But you're right. I can't think of another player that's done anything like that at this point in the draft process. By the way,
it fits Abdul though. That kind of like fits how he is. That he would just like be doing that.
Just do what he wants.
Yeah, just do it. I'm just gonna do what I want. I'm sure his agent was like, "Hey, yeah, do what you want. You're probably going number one anyways."
Yeah. There's not anything you're gonna really do at this point from. Well, I mean, there's plenty he could do at this point to ruin his draft stock. Not that we expect or anticipate any of those things from Abdul. I do before we get into like the last part of the show, which is kind of just I want to pick your brain of what you've been thinking about in the offseason. This is a time where a lot of us have a chance to just kind of mull over certain things. And I think this is a cool time to dig into some of those things. I do want to say, like, it has been almost exactly a year since we had you on the show. And I just can't believe like the difference between this year and last year and what you've been able to do. Just want to give you credit for that. But I'm also a little bit jealous because every single time I come on your show, we're in person and like we're hanging out, and it's just infinitely better to do it that way. So this is an open public invite. At some point this summer, we're going to like sit on the back porch and do a live show where like we can actually get together, hang out, and do a show in person. The infrastructure that we have here is just a little bit different than yours. But I'm going to make sure that we have an opportunity to do that later this summer. So you better keep a weekday open for me. Okay.
I got you. I'm ready whenever. Yeah. The T Frank and Landon podcast definitely coming sometime this summer for sure.
Yeah. What's on your mind? What are you thinking about? Whether it's on your show or just something that you haven't been able to really put words to yet that you want to kind of like talk out here on the last segment.
Without a doubt, what are we going to do at right tackle? It's an embarrassment of riches. It's good.
Yeah.
But, Anthony Donko, in my opinion, and then I was literally having this conversation yesterday, the day before that, and 3 days before, because it seems like something everybody is interested in. Anthony Donko, in my opinion, I think we can both agree when healthy, I think he was the best offensive lineman on this team. That's what it felt like to me. I think we kind of saw his impact, and obviously it took Ruchi just a little bit, and then we get into the playoffs, and Ruchi, obviously we don't put a ton of credence into PFF always. They're not 100% right with their scores. You can't just fully dictate if someone was absolutely great off the score, but it gives you a good idea. And Nolan Ruchi was like every single week, it was like top graded offensive lineman in PFF, Nolan Ruchi. We both watched the tape. I thought Ruchi did a fantastic job. It's hard now to say, no, Ruchi, you're going to go back to kind of the bench, and then Donka's going to start. I mean, honestly, how I see it happening, which I think is going to be really kind of just not good because I live that life, is they're going to rotate.
Yep.
Unless they were to put Donko at right guard. Obviously, there is that possibility.
He did at guard, which is important to remind people that it is technically a possibility, although it might be unlikely.
Yeah, I remember talking to Don. He very much prefers tackle. I've spoken with him about that. He likes the space. That's probably because he has like 36-inch arms and he can just like touch you off the line.
And he's super quick. Like it's amazing that he is as quick as he is at as natural of a 330 pounds as you can be. Like he just carries it so well.
He does. I think let's give offensive linemen a little credit here, moving backwards, trying to block. Abdul Carter moving backwards. How does that sound? Just saying. I'm just putting that out there. It's a rough job, but it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, clearly, I think offensive line is the strongest group. It has the most depth, really, out of any position. I was even talking about it with Nick Dawkins on my show the other day. It was like, we fully believe that we basically have two offensive line that could start. Not saying that the second line would obviously not be as good as the first one, because I think the first one is the best in college football. If not the best, it's top two or top three. But the second line would still be probably above the 2020 Penn State offensive line.
Well,
so yeah,
well,
then he would. Actually,
no. I'm saying that yes, you're right, but what's the bar here?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Threshold?
It's like,
yeah,
there was. Well, actually, I remember that after Maryland in 2020. I hate to bring up bad memories. That was a bad one. But I remember Coach Trout. I was a recruit, and he called me, and he's like, "Yo, we're gonna get this fixed. Like, I promise, we're gonna get it done." And I'm sitting there at home. I'm enjoying like the time off, and I'm like, "Yeah, Coach, whatever." I don't really believe him, but I'm like, "Hey, I'm coming anyway." So like, it is what it is. But
yeah.
Philip Trautwein really does deserve a lot of credit for what he has done from taking the room that was quite literally the punching bag, and rightfully so, but even sometimes not. It was kind of like, even if it was a bad game, it was like, hey, the offensive line sucks and it's their fault.
Right. Anything bad was ascribed to the offensive line, just like the receivers are right now. It was a and by the way, infinitely better than it was in 2014, 2015 when James Franklin took over the Penn State program, and they had like 2 scholarship offensive linemen, and they're pulling people from Lackawanna to see if they can play because they're 6'8", not necessarily because they're, football sized. I've been working on this kind of from a lot of different angles, the same conversation. First off, I'm not Landon in terms of understanding the position, but I have listened to him and we watched film together, and I've learned a lot from him. Trying to kind of paint the picture of where Nolan Ruchi was at the beginning of the season, some of the things that he was doing, as opposed to that playoff run. And it's been a super fascinating deep dive into his particular play. I'm going to be doing more of it today, actually, and then hopefully putting it out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great reason to sign up for $1. You can see Trautwein's impact on him as a football player over the course of a season. So sometimes these things, Landon, I feel like they're very ethereal. Like, you can't really put your hands on it. You can't actually see Olu Fashanu get better because it's happening behind the scenes. You get to see it. We don't get to see it. But when Nolan Ruchi's playing early in the season and he's putting his head down at contact, and I'm sending these clips to Landon every week being like, this is bad. And then suddenly in the playoffs, he's keeping his head up, and maybe he gets beat, but he can recover for the first time in the course of the year. That doesn't happen on its own. Like, that is something that happens through the process of development. And I'm really interested to kind of bring a full circle to what you were talking about. When this right tackle situation plays out, I think Anthony Donko needs a chance to just get healthy. When you sustain an injury that late in the season, there is this tendency to think, okay, they'll be back next season, like just with the open-ended of next season. And we always talk about these injuries in terms of like, what's the return to play? And whether it's 9, 12, 8 months, whatever it is, there is a clear difference from watching football players. There is a clear difference between you are legally allowed to play and can you play well. I think it's a huge opportunity for Penn State to have both of those guys play next year, be meaningful. And if Ruchi gives them that runway to get Donko back up to full health, that might be the most valuable thing they can have, is the fact that they have 3, maybe 4 tackles that can play so that they can sustain quality play. I do think that injury played an impact in Drew Allar's decision-making and his comfort in the pocket last year. I think that's a big part of it. That's something I've been trying to dig into recently, of trying to look at how the offense changed and his change with Ruchi and Donko back there. So him being comfortable, this is all leading to getting Drew Aller to be as comfortable as possible, which leads us all the way back to Trace McSorley. We come full circle on the show.
That's great. I like how you brought it back around, T. Frank. No, well, real quick, I do want to say something about Nolan Ruchi, and just to kind of take you behind the scenes, because I know exactly what it's like. Early on in the season, and yes, me and T. Frank are sending videos to each other of the All-22 tape, and we're saying, oh, look at this. What is going on here? And that was what we saw with Nolan Ruchi, a ton of head ducking. And I can tell you what was happening. Trot was saying, circling it with the little laser pointer in the meeting, and he's saying, this cannot keep happening. If you keep ducking your head, you're going to get beat. And then Nolan goes and writes in his notebook, don't duck my head. And then you go out, and then you do 1.5 million reps. And I guarantee you, Trot was doing extra reps with him pre-practice, post-practice of, punching something and making sure that head almost, you have to over-exaggerate it first. And like, that was his main problem. Let's just talk about like the ducking the head is like when you're punching, like literally throwing your neck back almost. And then like, you don't actually want to do that, but
you just want to stay in that posture and be able to do, which is so crazy, Landon, because he's 6'8". like, it is fascinating the way that players play and like the length that he has, and he still feels like he's playing like a short player, which is, I always talk about length versus functional length. What is the actual length that you use based on your technique and your ability to use your hands? And he got so much better at that last year. And I still think there's tons of room for improvement.
Yeah, I really like how you say that. T-Frank, you have a really good understanding. I just got to give you your props. You have a very good understanding of not doing the cliche things of just saying like, oh, this makes sense, so I'm going to say it. And it's like, yes, that's totally a thing. The actually using your length, the functional length, or just having length and not actually, because if you're just a catcher and you have 36-inch arms, but you go like this and you basically clasp on people, your length doesn't really matter that much because you're not using it.
Can I take you all the way back to Anthony Donko? Bringing that part of this conversation, watching him in high school, he didn't know how to use his length either. And then suddenly he's the best tackle on the team within a year. Like, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. A dude who was built in a lab that looked like he didn't understand football. And in one off season, in one full season at Penn State, goes from that guy who's looking around in pass pro, looking for something to do, that turns into the team's best offensive lineman. And it was, again, an amazing tribute to his work ethic and Phil Troutwine and the job he's done with these guys.
Yep. I'm right there with you. It is, honestly, you're talking about, obviously Donka had fantastic, and I thought it was for him to start at left guard, because he started that 23 year. He was originally like the third string left guard behind me, actually, and then ends up being the right tackle for the majority of the Peach Bowl. Going from left guard to right tackle, there's literally couldn't be more of a different change. I guess center to right tackle maybe, but that's pretty drastic for a freshman to have to do that, and he did it at a really, really high level. But I would offer up Abdul Carter, far and away the greatest in-season development I have probably ever seen in my life. I was laughing almost. I went back to watch some of his like week 2, 3, 4 pass
some of that
rush
Bowling
tape.
Green stuff.
Dude, I'm just going to say, like, he was a bad pass rusher. Like, he wasn't good. If he won, he just won because he beat the tackle off the line and then just bend the corner and tried to get to the quarterback. Like, he was executing spin moves in the worst way possible. And it was like, it seemed like kind of bye week into kind of Illinois at start. It was like the confidence of Illinois where he got 2 sacks. Both were from that quarterback spy position. It wasn't like they were like true rush sacks, but like that really like brought out Abdul Carter, incredible, as he calls himself. He got asked about that on the podium today, why his Instagram handles are labeled incredible. He said, because I'm an incredible athlete. And, and I was like, I can't argue with that one. But so he gets that easily, far and away. Shout out Deion Barnes. I don't think he's been given enough credit for the in-season pass rush development of Abdul Carter. But I think Nolan Ruchi is number 2 as far as the best in-season development. And that has not been talked about. So good job for you, T. Frank, for bringing that up. Honestly, I haven't even said that, but that recognition deserves to be, given to Nolan Ruchi for sure.
So the last one, and this actually ties in nicely here. Something else I've been thinking about, kind of a slow development conversation story is, and we're going to dip into recruiting here, Peyton Falzone. Now, I want to be clear. I haven't gone in and watched Peyton's full games. He is a Pennsylvania quarterback, athlete tag. And I just want to throw up his highlights here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel so you can see Peyton and his throwing motion. It's not great, but it's not far off. And so over the last, month to, I just kind of openly asked the question, how far off is he from being a viable quarterback prospect? Because Penn State, he's so athletic, and I know he's playing against a certain level of competition. He's so athletic, Penn State sees him as a tight end prospect. And so he's got all of the tools. I would say his throwing motion leaks a lot of power from the ground up, and he's still able to as you can see here, off the back foot, throw 45 yards in the air on a line. And then he started working with Brad Mandler, who is Drew Allar and Ethan Grunkmeyer's quarterback coach. Here's the update that came, I think, this morning. So I'm going to put this up here. You saw his throwing motion previously. Now let's look at what he's being able to do with Mandler at his training facility. I'm not saying that he's going to be a quarterback in the future, but he's doing all the right things. He's putting in all of the effort to become a quarterback. And I mean, this looks pretty good. I'm not a quarterback expert, but I'm seeing much smoother mechanics here. And here at the end, Brad puts a kind of a slow-mo of his throwing motion, and you can see the difference in his ability to throw the football. And this is not necessarily about power. This is about consistency and mechanics. And I think keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on Peyton Falzone, because when you've got those kind of tools and you're putting in that work, the IQ stuff, the football IQ, I don't know about that yet. But we're talking about the building blocks of a great quarterback. He's got as much talent, if not more, than Matt Zollers, who was a 5-star from Pennsylvania last year. So, just keep an eye on that.
I think similar, not as much, but similar to kicker, a golfer, it's rotational. And that's the biggest thing. I've gotten to talk to Brad Mendler actually about that. And he's like, sometimes we have to fully break down a quarterback and just restart from the beginning. And if you see, I don't want you to pull it up again, but like there was so much torque and like whip on those first throws that he was doing. And it looked so much different. Like that's how you generate the force to really have that zip.
Yeah, his kinetic chain was off. His feet weren't right, and his hips were, I think, firing early. Just based, like we're going to break it down. And what I've learned of this is like the kinetic chain from the ground up. You need to use your arm like a whip, and his was off. But it wasn't like it was so far off that it was irredeemable. His throwing motion was actually fine. It was just kind of like he was shot putting the ball, right? So he's not using his arm as a sling. He was trying to throw with his arm and also with his hips. Like he was halfway there. And putting it all together, like I think that if you're Penn State, you have to consider taking him seriously as a quarterback prospect and not just putting him in the tight end bucket. I think they have to keep that door open. I don't know if anyone else agrees with me. I've floated that idea on the recruiting show, and the other guys have been like, we'll see. So, we're not putting any expertise or any of Blue White Illustrated stamp of approval of this is intel. This is just Landon and I shooting the here at the end of the show. As it is, though, it's the end of the show. This is so much fun. Thanks for coming on, Landon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What do you got coming up?
Yeah, actually, the main thing I wanted to plug is tonight, 6 p.m. I'm going live at the Student Bookstore. I'll be live at Landon Tengwall on my YouTube. I got Dom DeLuca, the Italian stallion, coming through. He's going to get there at 6:30, but we're going to start at 6 and probably do something similar to this. If you guys have any questions, want to hang out, just chop it up with me and kind of do a little Q&A. So that will start at 6 p.m. And then Dom DeLuca will be coming through. We'll be talking about the fact he is the gift of West Piston, PA, Scranton, PA. I swear I go home with him, T. Frank, sometimes, and it's like we get home, we'll like pull up to his front house, and everybody like comes out, and it's like applause. He's like the savior in West Piston. I've never you want to talk about a high school football movie, T. Frank? This guy, Dom DeLuca, lived that in that town, no doubt. Awesome. So, yeah, that's all I got, though. But hopefully, me more T. Frank and I content. And I don't know if you guys ever need any more guests. I'm always around. I love coming on. So
I've been meaning to have you. Like I said, I've been meaning to have you on more often. I just wanted to find a way to do it a little more of like what we normally do, because Len and I do the tailgate show before Penn State home games and away games, and we're in person. And I think it's been one of the most fun things I've done here on the YouTube show. And I don't want to do more of these like via I'm staring at a camera. Like it's just better in person. So I was trying to figure out a way, but then it turns out like just do it and it'll be fine. And of course you nailed it. So that'll do it for today here on the BWI Live Show. Landon Tengwall, I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We'll be back tomorrow with a recruiting show, more information, deep dive onto quarterbacks. Troy Hune, why did he drop in the on 300? Where Penn State's targets are on that list and how that has all changed with the latest update from On 3. Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz are going to be here to discuss all of that. Programming note as well. It is spring break, the second week of March, and we are taking spring break as well. I don't know the last time we've taken a break. So we're no shows that week. You can go watch Landon. Again, maniacal work ethic. He's going to have probably 5, 6, 7, 8 videos that week. Our guys need a break. They've been going hard since the beginning of training camp last year. So we'll have a brief pause and we'll be back for spring football the next week. So that's just want to get that in everybody's ear that's coming up in just a little bit. But as always, thank you for showing up on the show. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk to you later.